The Cultural Role of Rhetoric by Richard M. Weaver, Part 4. This brings us to the necessity of concluding that the upholders of mere dialectic, whether they appear in this modern form or in another, are among the most subversive enemies of society and culture. They are attacking an ultimate source of cohesion in the interest of a doctrine which can issue only in nullity. It is of no service to man to impugn his feeling about the world qua feeling. Feeling is the source of that healthful tension between man and what is, both objectively and subjectively. If man could be brought to believe that all feelings about the world is wrong, there would be nothing for him but collapse. Socrates was saved from trivialization of their kind by this initial commitment to the beautiful and the good. He is also saved in our eyes by the marvelous rhetoric of Plato. These were not enough to save him personally in the great crisis of his life, but they give high seriousness to the quest which he represents. The modern exponent of dialectic have nothing like these to give respectability to their undertaking or persuasiveness to their cause. But both, in the long view, are the victims of supposing that definition and classification are sufficient as the ends of speech. In a summing up, we can see that dialectic, when not accompanied by historical consciousness and responsibility, works to dissolve those opinions, based partly on feeling, which hold a society together. It tends, therefore, to be essentially revolutionary and without commitment to practical realities. It is even contumacious toward the giving, ignoring it or seeking to banish it in favor of a merely self-consistent exposition of ideas. Rhetoric, on the other hand, tries to bring opinion into closer line with the truth which dialectic pursues. It is therefore cognizant of the fact that situations, and it is at least understanding of popular attitudes. There is a school of thinking, greatly influenced by Socratic tradition, which holds that it is intellectually treasonable to take popular opinion into account. The side that one espouses in this issue will be determined by his attitude toward creation. When we look upon the given of the world, we find two things: the world itself and the opinions which mankind has about the world. Both of these must be seen as part of the totality. The world is a primary creation, and the opinions of man are creations of the men who live in it. Next, the question becomes, can we regard the world as infinitely correctable and men's opinions of it as of no account? Socrates could do this because he believed in a god or gods. The world is by him from the beginning condemned. It is a prison house, a dark cave. It is the realm of becoming which is destined to pass away. All things tend toward realizing themselves in a godlikeness, at which time the mortal and earthly will have been shuffled off. A complete reliance upon a dialectic becomes possible only if one accepts something like this Socratic theodicy. But the important point is that it denies the axiological status of creation. The modern counterpoint thinks he can affirm that creation is infinitely correctable because he believes only in man and speaks only on his behalf. When we examine his position, however, we find that he believes only in the natural order. This he reveals by his insistence upon positivistic proof for everything. But from the positive order he cannot draw the right inferences about man. He can find no place for those creations like affections and opinions which are distinctly human and which are part of the settlement of any culture. For him an opinion, instead of being a stage of historical consciousness which may reflect a perfectly bona fide, if narrow experience, is just an impediment in the way of the facts. His dialectic would move toward the fact and seek to destroy that which holds the facts in a cohesive picture. On his principle, a cohesive or systematized outlook must involve distortion, and this explains why he automatically refers to rhetoric as propaganda. In belief, the dialectician of our day has no adequate theory of man. Lacking such a theory, he, of course, cannot find a place for rhetoric, which is the most humanistic of all the disciplines. Rhetoric speaks to man in his whole being, and out of his whole past, and with reference to values which only human beings can intuit. The Semanticists have in view only a denatured speech to suit a denatured man. Theirs is a major intellectual error committed by supposing that they were going to help man by bringing language under the surveillance of science. There is never any question that rhetoric ultimately will survive the scientistic attack. The pity is that the attacks should have ever have been made at all, since proceeding from contempt for history and ignorance of the nature of man, they must produce confusion, skepticism, and inaction. In the restored man, dialectic and rhetoric will go along hand in hand as the regime of the human faculties intended that they should do. This is why the recovery of value and of community in our time calls for a restatement of the broadly cultural role of rhetoric.